Hi, YouTubers. It's been a while since I've posted a video, and a lot of people think that I haven't posted a video because I'm doing better or I'm cured. But no, I mean, certain aspects are better, and I'll I'll get into that with my next video. But this video, I just want to read something to you that I wrote 4 years ago. Um, it's called My Story, and I think that I wrote this for dpselfhelp when you sort of explain what happened to you and how it happened to you, kind of thing. So I'm going to read that to you. Um, Hopefully this video will work. I know that the voice, the audio, and the video picture are still not in sync. And it's funny, when I play the video back on my computer, they're in sync, but when I upload it onto YouTube, then they're not in sync anymore. So if anybody knows how I can fix that, that'd be great. Um, Supposedly, I'm allowed to upload videos that are longer than 15 minutes now. I'm not sure why. YouTube just said, "Congratulations, you're now able to upload videos longer than 15 minutes." So last time I made a video, I was only able to make videos up to 10 minutes long. So I'm not sure how long this can go. I might cut it off around 15 and then pick up the rest of what I wrote, start talking about that again in another video. But there are some other things other than this, what I wrote 4 years ago, that I'd like to talk about, and I will do that in my next video. Hopefully, I will do it very soon, but there's just so much stuff that comes into my head that I'd like to talk about that I'm writing it down, so I'm making a list of things. Anyway, I hope you're still finding my videos helpful, and I really do appreciate your comments. A lot of them make me feel really good, and I care about you guys, and I will probably address some of the comments that I've had in my next video. So, okay. So, yeah, I wrote this 4 years ago. Okay. After 12 years, I still often find myself in tears whenever I think about it. Well, might as well get started, but where to start? First of all, I quickly became sick and tired of explaining this all, so I created a website to do it for me. I have often given out my website address to individuals and doctors for them to read. The website address is blah blah blah. It was through GeoCities, and for some reason GeoCities shut down, and so my website has disappeared. I might make another one at some point. Somebody just informed me that Google actually lets you make your own website. I don't know if that's connected to GeoCities. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I will check that out. So what you read here is also written on my webpage, though there is more information here or there than here. Well, not anymore. At one point, I attempted to give all of this a name, but could not find anything deserving enough. As so, I will just call it my story. My story will begin with a brief character sketch of me before the problems began, followed by a description of the events surrounding the onset of my symptoms, a complete list of symptoms, a list of all the efforts I have taken to determine the causes of my problem, and ways to minimize the symptoms, and finally a section dedicated to research and references. Before that one fateful day that drastically altered my life, people would describe me as a perfectionist and a high achiever. I was often told I was too hard on myself. Furthermore, I was quite a worrier and had been since I was a child. My brother used to tell me I would die of an ulcer, which of course only perpetuated my worrying. I was quite self disciplined, which may have come on from dancing full time for 6 years. Aside from dancing, I also participated in swimming, skating, rowing, Girl Guides, high school concert bands, sea cadets, horseback riding, basketball, and track and field. And I'm probably forgetting something. I also belonged to the yearbook club as well as the grad committee. In both elementary, middle, and high school, I received straight A's. People used to tell me how smart I was. I would then respond, telling them that I was not smart. I just really applied myself when it came to studying, which I still believe to this day. Okay, as you can see, I was well rounded and had huge potential when it came to establishing a career, and I was very career oriented. My parents had ingrained in me the idea that in order to be happy in life, I had to have a successful career, which would come only after obtaining a university degree. Or so that's what I felt, um, that how they felt. uh, I don't blame them for training me to think in this way, or so the way I thought they got me to think. Neither of them had gone to university, but they recognized the increasing standards in society when it came to schooling. When they were growing up, one did not need a degree to get a job. The one thing I wish I had been taught was that I did not need a high paying job in order to be happy. There is more to life. But it took me getting sick to realize this. Despite my high dedication to schooling, prior to the surfacing of my illness, I was a happy, healthy girl with a bright future, and I liked who I was. Unfortunately, I was way too comfortable in my life situation. At the end of my grade 7 school year, my parents divorced, and I moved in with my mom. Because there were no warning signs, the divorce was completely unexpected for me, but for some reason, I wasn't really bothered by it. It may have been because I was busy, so busy with my own life, school, extracurricular activities, and friends. I actually remember being excited that my mom and I were going to have our own little house together. I think I cried once while in bed trying to fall asleep, but it only lasted a few moments, and that was that. During my grade 8 year, I met a boy who eventually became my first boyfriend. We entered high school together, which was grades 9 to 12. I was 14 years old. He was quite the player, and being the player that he was, many of the older girls in the school liked him and wanted to date him. But there was one problem. I was dating him, and I wouldn't let him cheat on me and get away with it. Because all the older girls wanted to date him, they would give me evil looks and try to intimidate me. If I recall correctly, a few even threatened to beat me up. I became very paranoid, and maybe overly paranoid, I'm not sure. My boyfriend and I decided the best solution would be to act as though we were not dating when we were at school, but we would continue dating outside of school. Of course, that's not what happened. This gave him the prime opportunity to get with other girls. Almost immediately, he began flirting with a number of different girls at school right in front of me, acting as though he was single. This crushed me, but this was only the tip of the iceberg. As a teenager, I was often exposed to marijuana, pot, weed, cannabis, bud, dope, etc. From what I had been taught in school, there was no harm in trying it. We were told it was not addictive, and the only damage it can cause results from chronic use. This damage consisted of lung deterioration and loss of brain cells. This is what we were told in school. I did not give in to peer pressure, but I did give in to curiosity. According to the so called experts, nothing bad would happen to me if I did it just a few times. And so I did, just a few times. I can't remember the exact number of times I did it, maybe 8 or 9. I remember the highs were fun. While high, everything seemed funny and time seemed to not exist. It made me relaxed and carefree. But I have not touched marijuana since August 28th, 1995. Why? Well, the high from the marijuana I smoked that day never subsided. This has this had never happened to me in the past. I had never even felt panicky or paranoid like some people do when they're on a marijuana high. Others have highs that sometimes last longer than a day, but this had never happened to me before. I was partially in denial about what was happening to me. I tried to pretend like everything was okay despite being extremely scared. I did ask the friends I had smoked with if they still felt high days later. They said no, and that they had never experienced anything out of the ordinary during their highs. When I was to- when I told them I was still high, they actually laughed at me and said that it wasn't possible. The only thing I could do was wait for it to go away, but it never did. It just simply persisted for days and days. This was the beginning of my nightmare. Some people think that it sounds awesome, but as you will see what happened to me in the days following, it really was a nightmare. I felt as though I was in a dream every day. Nothing seemed real. I felt like life wasn't happening, like I was in a completely different state of consciousness. My vision was distorted, objects appeared two dimensional and fake. It was as though I was looking at the world through a fishbowl full of water. I would experience numerous time lapses each day where I felt like minutes had gone by and I did not know what had happened during that time. It was as though I had entered back into reality only to be kicked out again. The crispness and attached emotions of being alive and in reality were gone. I felt drugged, sluggish, and like a zombie, as though half of my brain had been removed. I was a robot, just going through the motions, trying to stay alive. I would easily get distorted, feeling like I had been spun around, especially in busy places. Flipping through clothes hanging on a rack in a store would throw off my balance, as would a few strands of hair in my field of vision. As I would turn my head from one side to the other, it would take a few seconds for my vision and brain to come together. I was completely ungrounded. A few months later, I developed what I now know is somatoform disorder. Uh, and I believe this is because my brain was just so stressed about what was going on. It needed a way to somehow dissipate the stress. So I developed constant dull headaches 24/7 and really bad muscle tension at the base of my skull. I felt a pressure inside my head, especially behind my eyes. I developed muscle twitches at the base of my skull that would turn my head slightly from side to side. On top of all of this, I developed major insomnia. When trying to sleep, my brain would be on overdrive, bombarding me with thoughts that actually didn't even make sense. I wasn't worrying, it was just random blabber, like my brain was overactive. In high school, I would go days without sleep. I began using earplugs to study and sleep. Also, my ears were crackly, like Velcro inside, and felt like they could never clear. Feelings of confusion were common. It was like during my thought process, my thoughts bumped into each other and got all tangled up. In situations where there was lots going on around me, for example, when I was in the school hallway, I had the most difficult time carrying on a simple conversation with people that were less than a foot away from me. I could not hear well, although I have no problems with my ears. I went to a hearing specialist. It was the filtering out background noise that I couldn't do. I had the hardest time forming words and sentences and even hearing what I had said. I was often unsure whether I had spoken or not. I couldn't filter out unnecessary visual or auditory stimuli. I also always felt like I needed to lie down because I had the sensation I wasn't getting enough blood flow to my brain. I had a hard time sitting because my neck just felt so uncomfortable and fatigued. I had a hard time at restaurants, especially drinking from a cup. It's like I didn't have the coordination to bring the cup to my mouth like this and put it down again. I often felt like I would stare into nothingness, quite often. I would just stare and think, or not. I was easily startled and much more clumsy than most people. My social anxiety also raged at this time. I began feeling like others were watching me, talking about me, and laughing at me, even though I knew that they weren't. The most bizarre symptom had to be the idea that others may be able to hear my thoughts. But I had such good insight into my symptoms that I never actually believed people could hear my thoughts. But I always wondered if it was possible. My thoughts just seemed so loud in my head, and sometimes I didn't know if I was thinking them or speaking them. And when that happened, I was actually just thinking them. When I realized I wasn't getting any better, the first attempt I made at helping myself was I made an appointment with a naturopath. and I told her about the marijuana. After trying her suggested remedy without success, I began making appointments with doctors, including many specialists. Initially, I did not want to discuss what had happened to me with marijuana, but rather focused on my individual symptoms, a big mistake on my part. I started with the insomnia, the headaches, the neck stiffness, and the fullness in my ears. I saw my family doctor on a number of occasions. I also visited physiotherapists, chiropractors, neurologists, more naturopaths. I had a sleep study performed. I visited an ear, nose, throat specialist regarding my ear fullness and hearing complaints. I visited my dentist regarding my teeth grinding and headaches. I had a number of different brain scans performed, as well as many, many different blood tests. I also had a CT on my upper spine and a few heart scans. In addition, I also had appointments with various counselors, psychiatrists, and psychologists. My first 10 years or so were spent going from appointment to appointment with no significant findings or diagnoses aside from anxiety and depression. But I knew there was more to it, and that was how I lived my life, one appointment after the next, hoping somebody would be familiar with my symptoms and discover the cause of them. I quickly began to despise the medical community because of the many unsympathetic, unhelpful, and disbelieving doctors I visited. I believe I never directly mentioned the marijuana as a culprit of my symptoms to to these doctors because I was too embarrassed and scared of people thinking I was crazy. I'm sure you can relate. I also hid certain symptoms, never speaking of them to anybody. I was so alone. No one knew what was going on with me, and no one could relate to my symptoms. I was on the edge of suicide for years. Because I had never heard of anyone having a marijuana high longer than a few days, and mine had developed into months, I turned away from marijuana as the cause of my symptoms and began investigating other theories. Some of my theories were quite bizarre. Oddly, I was reading a book at the time about a boy who had a brain tumor. I actually had all of the symptoms that he had from the brain tumor. I thought I had a brain tumor too, which is common for people with depersonalization. But after numerous investigations, it was concluded I didn't have one. But I still worried it had gone undetected and that I was dying of a tumor for years. Another of my theories was that my brother was poisoning me, and no, this was not far fetched. My mother also worried that he would kill us in his sleep, as he was a very difficult child. After that idea settled, I began to wonder if I had been in a major accident, fallen into a coma, woken up with brain damage, and for some reason nobody would tell me about it. A breakthrough came one day, 10 years after initially becoming ill, when I was Googling my symptoms on the internet. I'm sure you can relate to that too. I came across this site, a self-help website for people with suffering from something called depersonalization disorder, a disorder listed in the DSM for some time now, though I had never heard of it. Most of my symptoms fit the symptoms of this disorder extremely well. I had never come across a description of my symptoms anywhere else. I couldn't believe it. I was in shock. I was in disbelief. I spent hours and hours for days on end reading other people's stories and descriptions of their symptoms. I was amazed to find many others with marijuana induced symptoms just like mine. I became to know the majority of my symptoms as depersonalization and derealization. At last, I was no longer alone. Also, unfortunately, no there is no medication known to significantly decrease symptoms of depersonalization and depersonalization and derealization for a majority of people. At this point in my life, I was still at university, but really struggling with the stress of being sick and having to study. So I decided to move back home to my parents and focus solely on getting better. I'm going to continue this in the next video. Thank you for watching and listening.